And we are back live here in the Tech Lounge at the Intel booth in Hall 3. Mobile World Congress 2015 it is. One more day to go. We are almost wrapping it up right now with my favorite topic, smart cars, or let's say cars in general. Well, I'm in Germany, I have to love cars, right? And even though that we live in Taiwan, where it is quite a challenge to drive a car in Taipei City, I tell you that. If you can drive a car over there, you can get on every Western street and drive it, blindfolded and backwards. That's no problem anymore. Seriously, it's not a challenge for you anymore. I'm so glad that we have Don Butler over here. He is the Ford Executive Director of Connected Vehicles and Services. Good to see you, Don.
Sasha, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You guys been the first car manufacturer to be here on the show floor at Mobile World Congress. You've been the first ones to be at CES. You've been the first ones to be at Computex. You've been the first ones to be at IFA. Congratulations for basically creating this market.
Well, thank you. We think it makes sense for us to be here at MWC, for instance, and at the other conferences that you mentioned, because it's about the car and it's about the experiences in the car that we can enable and leveraging our partnerships with others to create those kinds of experiences. And we need to kind of get out of the traditional car show umbrella. We still need that, obviously, right? Yeah. We've got Ford folks that are in Geneva right now as we speak. But Mobile World Congress makes sense for us because it helps us to continue to address our concerns around how do we solve the mobility challenges around the world.
And especially, when I look at the younger generation, like the teenagers and the trends, especially in a metropolitan area, sometimes I feel like the automotive industry lost a whole generation, right? Because public transport systems are great. We can see huge momentum in some areas with bicycles, right? Especially over here, when I look at a city like Barcelona, a very smart city, where they have a great infrastructure of a public bicycle system. I think the way that you are reaching out to this generation is making a difference right now.
We hope it's absolutely making a difference. And actually, the things that you mentioned are some of the things that we're looking at as well. I mean, going all the way back to when Bill Ford was here at MWC in 2013, and he laid out his blueprint for mobility. And one of the really kind of profound statements that we're making when we say that is, we don't believe that as we go forward in the future that Ford will be the single point solution for mobility, right? In terms of how we drive our business today and how we make money today, it's primarily through designing, building, and selling a vehicle. But as we go forward in the future, we need to understand that we'll be part of those mobility solutions, not necessarily the sole piece of them. And so we do need to look at experiments and partnerships. And so, for instance, here at MWC, we're experimenting with e-bikes, for instance, right, and understanding how might we, in multimodal transportation ways, leverage those different types. And Ford would play a role in that transportation experience and understand how we would work with other partners to really make it an experience that our consumers would enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I actually stopped by to check out the e-bike.
Yeah.
It's very comfortable. And it's actually very well designed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd love to take credit for it.
I just hopped on it, and they were like, "What are you doing? Get off of that!" But I was like, "What? Oh, you can't just. Oh, okay, sorry." But actually, it's really, really well designed, and I was actually really surprised to see Ford come out with an e-bike, especially because I just thought cars. Right? I didn't think that you guys would be thinking so far forward as to pedal assist and that kind of thing. And are you thinking about maybe because there's a lot of really amazing apps within the Ford ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's going to branch over into the bicycles? Are you guys going to actually do that?
So we have brought the bikes here as the kind of introduction, and we're honestly going to see what kind of reaction we get, what kind of consumer response and industry response do we get. I can't say right now, are we going to go into the bike business? I don't know. I'm not going to rule it out, though. And it's really part of what we're doing underneath this umbrella of what we call smart mobility. And what we're doing with that is bringing together all the different facets that we're working inside and outside the company on mobility solutions. So it starts with connectivity, right? How we connect vehicles, and that's both beamed-in connectivity, vehicle as receiver, that's broad-in connectivity, so a lot of the things that we're doing with AppLink and Sync and leveraging the capability of smart devices and apps that are brought into the vehicle. And then it's built-in connectivity, so the vehicle as its own independent node on the network, able to independently transmit and receive information. So connectivity is one piece. Different mobile solutions, whether it be public transport or bikes or walking, right? And understanding how we incorporate those into the transportation experience. And then the emerging area of autonomy and self-driven vehicles, and kind of how would that play a role in helping to form mobility solutions as we go forward in the future. And then big data, leveraging the data that we're gathering both from connected vehicle experiences as well as data that we can gather from outside constituencies and marry together to create contextual awareness in travel situations. And then finally, doing all of that from the standpoint of enabling great customer experiences. And again, some of those experiences will come about by people owning a Ford vehicle. Sometimes those experiences will come about by people sharing a Ford vehicle.
Don, you just named some two products, or I would even call them initiatives. First we had Sync, and then, oh my God, this is already like 3 years ago, AppLink, when AppLink came to the market.
That's right.
And plus, what I love about you guys is you wanted to create open standards with it. You
Yes.
made it open source, and that was a very, very bold statement for the whole industry, saying, you know what, we want other guys to join us and to help us here together to create an ecosystem. And I think this is something that the industry is still missing, and I'm constantly complaining about this.
It's part of our mentality of understanding that we won't be able to answer all the questions in the future. We need to work with partners to make that happen. We also want to make sure that we're creating an environment within autos, for instance, that is attractive to developers. And so if there's a specific Ford solution and a specific BMW solution and a specific Toyota solution, as an application developer, is that really attractive to me, right? But if there's an industry that gets together that says, here's the open source way that you can connect into our vehicles. It'll be safe, it'll be informative, it'll be intuitive for consumers. You know, that's the reason that we took AppLink and we turned it open source and we created SDL. Because we believe that as an industry, it's up to us to help consumers and to help consumers get the experiences that they want. And increasingly, our lives are revolving around smartphones. They've become the digital hubs of our lives, right? And so we either fight against that and say, no, you must do everything specifically for our vehicle, or we embrace it, we accept it, and we work with it.
And plus, we have standards for smartphones, right? You can run the same app on a Lenovo phone, on a Sony phone, on a Samsung phone. It's happening. These are also huge brands that are on this market, also almost as old as the car manufacturers and the brands in the automotive industry. And they came together based on operating system. And I think this is a shift of paradigm for the automotive industry, that we also need to understand the car of the future will have an operating system. Right now it's all about engineering, and we think about, you know, all these connections between the engine and the wheels, and all of this has to work together. Now we're going to have operating systems in the car of the future. And now it's up to the manufacturers to come together and shape this platform.
We need to begin to think, and in Ford's case, continue thinking more and more like a software company, and operating like software companies operate. And you have to think about, in the tech industry, for instance, the notion of competition and the notion of cooperation become blended, right? If you think about Apple, for instance, and Samsung and Apple are fierce competitors in the mobile handset business, right? But Samsung's a supplier to Apple in terms of chips and displays, right? And even your iPhone, you've got Apple Maps, you've got Google Maps, so they coexist. And the way we like to think about it is best experience wins, right? So have a platform that is foundational, that everybody can connect into, that makes it easy, simple, seamless for the consumer, but ultimately the best experience, and we think within a Ford vehicle, we're delivering great experiences. Best experience wins.
You know, that's really interesting that you said that Ford should kind of operate like a software company. One of the things that kind of made me raise an eyebrow when I noticed that Tesla was pushing updates to their car and activating new features. I was like, hold on, your car gets an update when you buy a new one 10 years later. Your car doesn't get an update 2 or 3 weeks later just to like there's some new sensors and things are finally ready, and that like actually blew my mind. And to say that Ford's thinking like that is even more impressive.
It is a totally different mindset, and from a Ford perspective, we've been updating our sync system continuously as well, and as we debut new generations of sync, you'll be able to update those generations as well, over the air as well as we go forward. And it's part of the mentality of understanding that we want that experience to get better over time. And we have to understand that we aren't setting the expectations. The expectations are set by how consumers are experiencing other devices, smartphones, TVs, everything else that's becoming more and more connected. That's the environment in which we operate. So the vehicle that I buy today, I want it to be as fresh and relevant and as up to date as the vehicle that someone else may buy 4 or 5 years from now. And our AppLink platform and SDL, the open source version of that, is a great way of enabling it because, as you all are aware, it takes a number of years to design a vehicle, and then that vehicle exists and it's driving for 10, 12, 13, 14 years. Well, with AppLink, what we're able to do is take advantage of the fact that those applications are changing constantly in that smart device, and our vehicle, through that set of structured APIs, is able to take advantage of that application being advanced and being moving and going forward in the future, while the vehicle itself, yep, it was designed 3 years ago, but it's still fresh and it's still relevant because of what we're able to do with AppLink, for instance.
I will always give you guys credit, and I told you this already before, but I also think that our viewers should know this. It's been 5 years since Ford sent me an email during CES, and they asked me if I could do a video for internal use about the future of mobility. And I talked about a lot of topics that you guys actually embraced and what you're doing. Like we already mentioned Sync, and we already mentioned AppLink, because for me it was all about standards, and I told you, please be open, create a standard. In July I'm having the closing keynote of the Association of Bavarian car manufacturers. So it's about the Audis and the BMWs in Germany, and this will be basically the theme, because I would love to see the automotive industry not relying on an operating system that is already out there. I love Android. I'm an Android user. I have an iOS. I don't want those guys to get a hold of all the cars that are out there. I don't want them to have all the data. I want this data to be anonymized and be part of the automotive industry. And that's why it's so important to make these statements and to say, you know what, we want to have a standard. We don't want to be, I know how Google approached car manufacturers. I know how Apple approached car manufacturers. And you're paying with your personal data. I feel much more secure with my personal data in the hand of you guys. And I also would love to share more data about sensors in the car with you guys, because I know what you're going to do with it. You're making the next generation a safer car. You can predict more things. What you're doing, for example, with M2M communication with car, the development is absolutely amazing. And I think it's very crucial to make these statements and to get them into the public.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And from the standpoint of data, we have a foundational principle that it is indeed your data, and it's your data. It's not Ford's data. So we are stewards of that data on your behalf. And that notion of stewardship has two components to it. First is safety and security. So making sure that it's safe, that it's protected from hacks and intrusions.
Yes.
So constantly monitoring what's going on and working with the best security experts and white hats to make sure that our vehicles are as much as possible impervious to infiltration and to attacks. There's also the notion of security in the sense of we won't do anything with your data that you don't give us permission to do. You will opt in. We will always make sure that when we collect data for a purpose, you'll know what that purpose is. And should we want to use that data, the personally identifiable data, for something else, we'll go back to you and we'll request your permission to make sure that you're always aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We also see value in anonymized data collected on an aggregate basis, as you indicate, for things like V2V, V to infrastructure sorts of things, to make driving more safe and to communicate potentially road hazards so that people can avoid them. But our idea is that we want to empower our customers. We don't want to be constrained. We don't want our customers to be constrained. Apple's a great partner of ours. Google is a great partner of ours. We're going to need to continue to work with them as we go forward in the future. But as an automotive industry, I think we want to maintain control of our own destiny as well.
Thank you. I really like that. It's a very, very important statement. And especially for your customers, we are talking about a different platform. This is not a smartphone. We're talking about a device that needs to physically bring me from A to B in the safest and most secure way. And I think what the automotive industry achieved in the last decades, when you're looking at the casualties and the public transport in the transport system all over, especially in the Western markets, how those went down, even though the saturation with vehicles in these markets went up.
Right.
This tells you a lot about what car manufacturers are doing with data and how crucial this is.
And actually, that's part of what we think as we go towards more and more autonomous vehicles. The greatest benefit is actually going to be safety.
Yeah.
Certainly convenience, certainly in terms of being able to allow you to be more productive. And we can envision a point where 5 years from now, there will be times in which your hands are not on the steering wheel, right? And if you think about even the semi-autonomous technologies that we have today, like lane keep assist and adaptive cruise control and blind spot detection, as those technologies evolve, we're going to move into that area of more and more autonomous types of driving. And the greatest benefit is actually the one that you mentioned, it's safety. We need a world in which there are no accidents. Mm-hmm. And if you think about the accident rates today, they're actually dramatically reduced, even though there are more miles driven. Yep. There are more vehicles on highways today. And we focus on safety. That is of paramount importance to us. And even though we're moving forward with technology and even though we want to embrace the latest and the greatest, we want to enable it safely, and we want to make sure we focus on the customer experience and delighting them and not just technology for technology's sake.
I truly believe that compared to the first airbag, compared to ABS, the autonomous car, right, will do just 10 times more to the safety. And plus, besides creating a more safer environment on our streets, it will also enable people that couldn't drive cars.
Absolutely.
In the future. If we were really talking about piloted driving,
yes,
right,
yes.
And elderlies to still commute and to still get around. And I think we're neglecting this a little bit, right? A lot of people are talking, oh no, I still want to keep control, right? Yes, autonomous driving doesn't mean that you are not in control of this car anymore. Maybe you just don't want to do this 1 hour of boring highway anymore on your own. But we also need to look at how we're enabling and getting those people mobile again that are not allowed to drive or that can't drive anymore.
You make an excellent point. And one of the first things that people think about when they think about autonomous vehicles, and actually I mentioned it myself, right? I said, oh, it helps you stay more productive and you don't have to drive. Well, it actually enables mobility for people that don't have mobility today. Yeah. And so whether it's the elderly or the disabled, or you can even imagine a situation where you want to make sure your children get from one spot to another spot, but you're not able to do that personally. We think there are untapped markets for autonomous vehicles, and those are some of the segments that we believe can be addressed with the capability that we've been bringing.
Yeah.
You know, I remember watching a couple, or experiencing one demo where you went into a little pod and then the car would watch you to like let you know if you were going to fall asleep, right? And then it would like track all of your movements and like try to like gain all this knowledge from you about how to make you a better driver. Mm-hmm. And it really made me realize that the car can actually watch you and interact with you, and you can have this like real two-way, it's because you're controlling it, but it can also kind of give you feedback on everything that's happening.
You're exactly right. And we've conducted a number of experiments around sensing and around cognitive load and trying to manage and monitor what's going on with drivers. But the way that we like to think about it is, I mean, all the buzz is about wearables, right? And the Apple Watch is coming out March 9th, I think, is the...
Yeah.
But anyway, right, everybody's thinking, the car is the biggest wearable, if you think about it.
That's a
right?
good point.
And so if you think about the sensing capability of a vehicle and the fact that we know where you are, right? And we can monitor and we can do things, hopefully, that improve the driving experience and ultimately improve your life as well.
When I'm talking to developers and developer conferences, I think one of the most exciting one was that was in June or July. I was in Kiev in Belarus, to talk to developers over there. By the way, an amazing crowd, so humble, well-educated people over there, and very motivated and so knowledgeable. And they were asking me about the next big thing. And I told them, you know what, actually it's going to be a platform that is 125 years old. It's going to be the car, because the car of the future will be the very, very first supercomputer that we own. It will also be, when we look at, when we're buying things and how the car is emotionalized, the most customizable, the most personalized, and the most expensive thing that we're buying in our lives is probably a house or an apartment. Mm-hmm. The next big thing is the car. Right, and we love to customize. Remember, like in the 70s or in the 80s, it was kind of hard to customize your car. Right, you could choose like 4 or 5 different colors, right, and everything else was going into the aftermarket, right, and you had all these tuners. And now I can go to your website and I can get my very personal Ford Focus, right. But the car of the future, when you see like chip manufacturers, what they're doing right now, Intel over here with this Edison, having a full computer of the size of a SD card. And I'm thinking of, just squeeze 200 of them into the car. Yeah.
Do it.
And and out of a sudden, you have like 2,000 cores on wheels that are driving into your smart home. You're connecting it to the grid of your home, and I'm outsourcing all the computing process onto my car. I think it's gonna happen because the car of the future, the automated car of the future, it needs a lot of processing power.
Sure,
we're talking
absolutely.
about a lot of images that are running through the cameras of the car. So this will happen.
You make another great point. If you think about the computing capability, actually that already exists within vehicles, and even more computing capability that's coming. So things like advanced driver assistance and leading towards autonomous vehicles. And Sasha, actually, you've kind of triggered my thinking, right? Because if you think about utilization and, gosh, while my car is parked, I've got all that computing capability there. Maybe I can do some sharing and some parallel processing at the same time.
Absolutely.
Very interesting, very intriguing.
It could calculate things, and it will be. Think about it when I drove the electric Ford Focus on your test track in Dearborn, which was so much fun. They were asking me after I drove like 15 of your cars. Right? They were asking me, okay, which one did you like the best? I said, you know what? It was the Ford Focus. I think the way it felt. Of course, the torque of an electric engine is just
instant,
amazing, right? Even though that I love your Mustangs and all of this, right? But I think an electric engine adds something different to it, and to see what the electric car of the future will do to us. It needs to be recharged, and it will be in our homes, right? And that's the most convenient place. While it's recharging, it's connected to a grid. So why shouldn't I connect it to my smart home? We will have these smart homes and just use it as the supercomputer it is. Use this processing power that is available while it's charging, where I can even use more of this computing power. And it's not moving right now, so I shouldn't waste the time, right? I won't have a computer in my home that is as powerful as my car.
Again, you're a visionary.
So we need to continue talking about this. Once again, I think you guys were an enabler for this industry. You've invented many, many cool things for the automotive industry. But what you did with AppLink and Sync changed the way. And you've been the first ones to start app developers challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm still waiting for a couple of manufacturers to even start to join you on this.
Even to think about it. I mean, the exciting thing a few years ago when I was like really paying attention to what Ford was doing with Sync AppLink was how you were having the conversation with developers.
Absolutely.
In the way that you were inspiring them to think of the mobile ecosystem in a different way, and how, Internet of Things isn't just a car, it's also your house, like you were saying, and it's everything on the street. And now that we have access to such powerful sensors now in our wrists, in our phones, in our laptops, and all of these things, and how you were like, that's a really great app, but what if right? And then like, because like your team was just so sharp on how to take things and kind of spin them around, and that's what really impressed me. Was that how it was such a two-way conversation.
And the headhunting was also very good. They also got some guys from the mobile industry over there. Seriously, you did a great job. That was the way to go, and that was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah,
it's part of as we talked earlier. It's part of thinking more and behaving more importantly, more and more like a software company. And we get a charge out of working with developers as well, because it kind of takes us out of our traditional zones of the way that we operate. And the thing is, again, we won't have all of the answers, right? Ford won't be able to decide this is the future and we're going to determine it and you're going to follow us, right? We need to understand and work with a number of different partners, whether it's app developers all the way to governments. But what we need to do is give them the tools, give them the platforms like AppLink and SDL, the open source version, so that we can experiment together, so that we can create together. And it's part of what is becoming more and more our DNA as a company, and I'm happy with our leadership in terms of Bill Ford and Mark Fields, and really inspiring us to innovate and challenging us to push ourselves. And another great example of that is the e-bikes that you had a chance to take a look at. That came about as a result of an employee contest. That wasn't like, let's go talk to all these bike manufacturers and see. That was an internal employee contest that said, what do you think about bikes and e-bikes and what might make sense? Give us your designs. And so everybody from electrical engineers to designers to IT folks, and the winners are the ones that came here today. And that is a way for us to culturally continue to change the company as well. So innovation is the spirit of kind of how we want to operate, and working with partners is within the spirit of how we want to operate, and thinking about our company and thinking about our industry differently in this technology and software-oriented future. It's what we're all about.
Absolutely love it. Competition drives innovation. You brought competition to the market. I can see it with also all your competitors over there, that they're starting to innovate, and I still think it's based on what you started like 4 or 5 years ago. It was somehow you got a little bit of a wake-up call, and it was a really good one. I love it when companies can turn it around, when they can build up momentum again, and when they make me excited again about their products and what they're doing out there. Thank you so much, Don, for being here on the live stream. If you want to get to know more about what Ford is showing over here, we will have the e-bike. We will have a video of it. But of course, you can also just head over to Ford.com. Just go into the press room over there to see what they've announced over here at Mobile World Congress. Once again, they've been the first one to enter all these shows all over the world, and I think you always have to give them credit for this. We're going to have like a 5 minutes break, and we're going to be back with Nicole, of course, with Steve Chippy Payne. Miriam should be also out there. We're going to wrap up the whole day for the next 45 minutes or so, so stay tuned.